A video popped up on Twitter of Trump discussing North Korea with Tim Russert in 1999. I think this is when he was considering a presidential run. I'm actually not sure. He may have... Did he run once before on like a third-party ticket or something? I feel like he may have done that. Or no, it may have been he's just been threatening runs all along until he actually ran this time. But this is 1999... and he's discussing the issue of North Korea. This gives us a little insight into what might be going on in his mind now.
One is North Korea, and you say that you, as president, would be willing to launch a preemptive strike against North Korea's nuclear capability.
First, I'd negotiate. I would negotiate like crazy, and I'd make sure that we tried to get the best deal possible. But look, Tim, if a man walks up to you on a street in Washington, because this doesn't happen, of course, in New York, but if a man walks up and puts a gun to your head and says, give me your money, wouldn't you rather know where he's coming from before he had the gun in his hand? And these people, in 3 or 4 years, are going to be having nuclear weapons. They're going to have those weapons pointed all over the world, and specifically at the United States. And wouldn't you be better off solving this really potentially unbelievable, and the biggest problem, I mean, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about Social Security. The biggest problem this world has is nuclear proliferation. And we have a country out there in North Korea, which is sort of wacko, which is not a bunch of dummies, and they are going out and they are developing nuclear weapons. And they're not doing it because they're having fun doing it, they're doing it for a reason. And wouldn't it be good to sit down and really negotiate something, and ideally negotiate? Now, if that negotiation doesn't work, you better solve the problem now than solve it later, Tim. And you know it, and every politician knows it, and nobody wants to talk about it. Jimmy Carter, who I really like, and he went over there, it was so soft. These people are laughing at us.
The former general of the Air Force, Merrill McPeak, the former Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin, said you could not launch a preemptive strike against North Korea because the nuclear fallout could be devastating to the Asian Peninsula.
I'm not talking about us using nuclear weapons. I'm saying that they have areas where they're developing missiles.
No, but taking out their nuclear potential would create a fallout.
Tim, do you know that this country went out and gave them nuclear reactors, free fuel for 10 years? We virtually tried to bribe them into stopping, and they're continuing to do what they're doing, and they're laughing at us. They think we're a bunch of dummies. I'm saying that we have to do something to stop.
But if the military told you, Mr. Trump, we can't do this.
You give me 2 names. You're giving me 2 names. I don't know. Do you want to do it in 5 years when they have warheads all over the place, every one of them pointing to New York City, to Washington, and every one of our... Is that when you want to do it, or do you want to do something now?
Damn. So he starts out by saying, oh yeah, I tried diplomacy, I tried to negotiate. By the way, where was that? And then he's like, well, if that doesn't work, he's talking about doing an attack on wherever they may have their weapons. But here's the problem with that, Don. Number one, there's no guarantee you're going to get all the places where they have their weapons. In fact, you almost certainly won't. Number two, if you actually launch an offensive strike against them, that is when they counter-attack and they take out Seoul, South Korea. Now, when that happens, you just created a giant war. You thought, yeah, I'm going to go in there and just bomb 1, 2, 3, and it'll be done, and I'm going to take out their weapons. It'll be tremendous, believe me. You want to do it now? You want to do it later? When do you want to do it? But no, since you're a fucking idiot, you just bungled us into a giant war. You try to take out their weapons. They counterattack on South Korea. So then now you have a hot war going on between North Korea and South Korea. The U.S. is dragged in, of course, because South Korea is our ally, and we would start attacking North Korea. And then, what the fuck does China do in that situation? China, who knows what the fuck they would do if they try to remain neutral. If anything, they'd probably lean against the U.S. and back up North Korea and say, what the fuck are you doing? And then Japan is in on our side, of course, with South Korea. Like, you may start a fucking world war because you're such a dumbass and you think, yeah, I'll just take out their missiles. And again, for the 9,000th time, the fact that he has these weapons. Now, it's not a good thing he has these weapons. I really don't want anybody having these super disastrous weapons. But it's not like he has them and he's like plotting on how to launch them on Tallahassee. No, he has them as a deterrent. As a deterrent. Two things can be true at once. Number one, his country is it's this crazy authoritarian hermit kingdom, and he's a vicious dictator. That can be true, and it can also be true that he understands he doesn't have the power to take out fucking the United States of America and South Korea in a war, so he has these weapons to make sure that, you know, the U.S. and South Korea don't topple him. Both of those things can be true at the same time. But the way that this guy talks about this stuff, man, he's just not... He's too much of a simpleton to, like, see a few moves down the road. You see what I mean? Like, he's not going, oh, if we do this, they do that. If they do that, we do this. Boom, it's a snowball effect, and here we are in the worst case scenario. And again, if you think, well, at least he's surrounded by people who will see that, not really. Maybe one, Steve Bannon, who's pretty non-interventionist on foreign policy issues, but pretty much everybody else is just standard, vicious, foam-at-the-mouth neocon. So if he's surrounded by, you know, a lot of people who are pushing him more towards war, he's obviously unstable and has no problem escalating and flippant and impulsive in his actions. What the fuck is holding us back from just having the worst case scenario unfold? So man, it's so bad. You gotta reel it in. You gotta reel it in, negotiate, do diplomacy, and just come to some sort of stabilization agreement. Again, I feel horrible for the people in North Korea, but there's not gonna be, like, there's no situation in which they're liberated and then everything works out great. There's no situation where that happens. Even if you do somehow topple, Kim Jong-un and his regime, then what? Then what? You have a whole country full of people who've been told that he's a demigod, and then the big bad U.S. just toppled them. The propaganda against the U.S. has been amazing and decades-long propaganda effort, so we're Satan, basically, to them. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? All of a sudden, you're just going to have a democracy? Are we going to occupy the country and run things for a while to try to get shit up and running for them? There's no good answer. There's none whatsoever. So, in the absence of a good answer, you just want to stabilize the situation. And again, I feel bad for the people in North Korea, but there's no Superman with a cape coming to save the day. In any conceivable scenario where they're freed, you know, there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who die. The only scenario where, you know, there might be some sort of liberation in the country is if it's from within. It's not going to come from without. And you also should never trust our motives to be humanitarian, because they're just not humanitarian. We could try to pretend, oh yeah, that's why we're doing it. We care about human rights. No, we don't. That's why are we buddy-buddy with Saudi Arabia and Israel? Like this with them. Doesn't matter what they do. Oh yeah, it's cool. They still are free democracies or something. So, yeah. And you even try the first part. He's like, yeah, diplomacy, negotiations. How'd that go? Now you're talking about raining fire and fury on them. And you're making statements that sound like their fucking statements. And when they say it, we know they're just huffing and puffing and they can't fucking back it up. You actually can back it up. And the U.S. is doing wars all over the place. So it looks to me like we're the ones who are going, all right, yeah, try me, and let's fucking go. Let's go. We'll launch the first attack. So reel it in, man. Offensive strikes. If you do an offensive strike, you are the bad guy. That used to be common sense. That used to be duh. Oh, you're the person who initiated? Then you're the prick. Then you're at fault in this particular fight. Now we think, no, we just got to do whatever we want, and then it's cool. We're still the good guys. The fuck is that about? The fuck is that about? Okay, so again, we're in a terrible situation now. President Numbnuts doesn't know how to do anything but escalate the situation and make it a giant crisis, and that's worst case scenario.